Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to give our hot take review of the game we just finished playing, The Large.
El Grande.
But before we do...
Or in English, El Grande.
Before we start talking about El Grande and give a description of the game, we're going to talk about some poll results. So I posted a poll on Twitter, and I said, do you prefer games where most of the scoring happens at the end of the game, or do you want scoring and position to be visible and clear throughout the game? Now, there's a lot of different options in here, and a lot of the responses on the poll reflected that, but how would you guys have answered that? The two options I gave were end-game scoring or in-game scoring. Do you have a clear preference between those two?
Well, the obvious answer there is scoring as you go. I mean, maybe I'm just a lazy gamer. Seeing the score as you go gives you a sense of where, how things are going, where the progress is, what you still need to do. I suppose if you know a game well enough that you can look at what's happening on the board and game out what is going to happen in that last round, that's great. But I don't know. I'm just not very good at that. So I like seeing the score as I go.
The actual obvious answer in there was that Tim's survey is, again, very flawed, and there should have been a choice C that's a combination of both, which I think is like what 90% of the responders put, like some sort of combination. That, for me, is the way to go for sure, because you get that excitement of like, oh, who's in the lead? Oh, and switching and swapping. Oh, man, this game's so back and forth. But then even the guy in last place still has a chance at some sort of big in-game scoring, like, haha, you guys didn't see any of this, but boom, I just got 59 points and took the lead and destroyed all you guys. So I like a combination of both along the way.
I feel like that's sort of built into the first answer.
Chris, it was funny that you answered that the obvious answer was in-game scoring, because the poll results reflected that 54% want end-game scoring and 46% want in-game scoring. So it wasn't the obvious answer, but it's cool that you prefer that. I agree, Adam. I should have had an option, a mix in here. Now, I like that you don't have to do this big, huge endgame scoring. Like I would prefer that most of the scoring happens in the game, and I also like that it gives you a sense for where your progress is and things like that. What I don't like about 100% in-game scoring is that it just leads to you knowing when you can't win anymore. There has to be some opportunity for a decent amount of points at the end of the game for me to feel comfortable with that. There's some exceptions, like Dune Imperium is really cool because you only score 10 points. So you can always see where everybody is, but you're usually only like within a couple points of somebody else. And towards the end of the rounds, you can end up getting like 2 to 4 points at the end of the round. So people can really flip that score. And there's some end game scoring that can happen. So that one's kind of an interesting one. But when you're talking about these big score tracks that get to 50 or 100 points, I want to see some of that progression. I want to see who I should be watching out for. I want to see how I'm doing, but I also want to have a chance for the big surprise, the big reveal at the end to see who was the winner. We saw that in El Grande tonight. It was like, we'll talk about it more, but it was a super fun end where like things were just kind of adding up at the end. The final points kind of added up and nobody knew exactly where it was going to fall. And then there's a big explosion of cheers when I actually won the game.
That's El Grande for you.
Was it cheers? A big explosion of cheers?
All right. So, yeah, anyway, I kind of agree with you, Adam, though. Like it should be a mix, but in-game, generally, I like a lot of that because you don't have to do all that in-game scoring. Like, I love Cascadia, but I hate that at the end you got to sit there for 15 minutes and score up the game for a 25-minute game or something like that, right? So...
Yeah, along those lines, I just want to mention Dominant Species is kind of like that too. During the game, you're going to get 70 points, 80 points, and then the in-game scoring, you're going to get 100 points. So it seems like all that during the game scoring is kind of pointless.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
That's like too far, right? There's a nice blend. If all the points you're scoring up in the middle don't do anything, then why waste your time messing with that? But it's good to have a little bit of a surprise, a little opportunity to jump ahead with some things happening at the end of the game.
Right, I don't know if you want to throw out 5 to 25% range of points in the end is kind of my ballpark good feeling spot, I think.
That feels good to me. Well, here's how some of the people that responded on the poll answered. So Sarah Reed said she likes Endgame because it can be disheartening if you're losing by a lot, like I mentioned. I know that can motivate some, but for me it's discouraging and I don't try as hard. So I keep more engaged in games where I don't know how well or poorly I'm doing. Yeah, there has to be an opportunity to win at the end or it's frustrating. I mean, to be honest, I think that's true for a lot of people. And I think the reason why I like that is because it helps a lot of people. For me, I just want to beat the next person ahead of me. So even if I'm like way in the back, as long as I have a chance at getting for the third place, I'm okay with that. But some people really feel bad about that. Chris Prime said, in-game for competitive players in games and end-game for the rest. I don't like non-gamers or non-competitive players to feel like they're out of the game before it's over. So that's true too, right? If you're playing a game that's like super competitive, if you're playing with a group that's super competitive, it's good to know where you are, who you got to fight against. But if it's just a casual thing, it's kind of nice to just get the surprise at the end and have fun with it. All Games New and Old said, I went with endgame scoring, but really I like it best when some scoring is open throughout the game while some is at the end. That way the person in the lead never feels fully safe and the person in last place doesn't feel doomed. Keeps it exciting for all players. And this random person Sarah Samuel said this is exactly what I was thinking as well. No, I'm kidding. Sarah's Adam's girlfriend. So we have regular interactions with Sarah on Twitter. I've never met Sarah in person.
I've met her in person. She's great. Yeah, you'd like her. She's pretty neat in person. So yeah, Sarah's awesome. I steal a lot of her ideas and then pass them off as my own in a traditional male kind of way. But she's fantastic and she brings a lot to the table. Hey, Chris, I want to bring up one of your favorite games, Star Realms, and how they do this scoring here, because I think that's one of the neatest ways, right? So you start with points, and then you're taking them away from your opponent, and the first one to take away all the points from the opponent is the winner. I think that's a pretty neat way of scoring too. You can assess how strong you are during the game. You can see the score right there, and then you're waiting for this kind of big explosive moment to put your opponent away. I think that's a really unique way of doing scoring. Of course, I say unique, and there's I can think of 4 or 5 games that do it that way, mostly deck builders that have copied that same mold. But what do you guys think about that kind of scoring? It's a little different, right?
I like that a lot. I mean, I think that's a great way to do scoring, and I think it's in keeping with what I said before about having the scoring happen as you go along. I mean, in this case, it's about going down instead of going up. Similar to A Feast for Odin is a good example, where you start with a whole bunch of negative points, and over the course of the game, you decline in negative points and go to more positive points. And I think that's a lot of fun.
There's a whole ton of people responded on this poll. Again, if you don't follow us on Twitter, get on Twitter, follow us at BG_hot takes, and follow these polls. A ton of people had great answers here. There's just 2 more I want to read because they annoyed the hell out of me. So the first was Mark the Thoughtful Gamer saying, depends entirely on the game. Some games justify one or the other. I don't know why one would have a strong preference without context. Mark, the whole reason I do these polls is so that we can all reflect our strong preference without context. That was just, a really depressing answer to me. I'm just kidding, Mark. You're being very thoughtful there. And then one other person, somebody else said that they don't like point scoring at all. Meeple Storm said, honestly, I dislike both. I much prefer games that are about completing objectives, rather than tallying victory points. Can you guys think of a game where the game is won by completing an objective versus victory points?
I have one right off the top of my head, and it's one that we'll be playing at the end of April, and it's Nemesis, where it is semi-competitive and you don't score points, but you are trying to be one of the people who one of the people who makes all of their objectives.
There's Hellenica, the story of Greece, has a system where I think there's 3 or 4 public objectives and 2 or 3 private. There's a series of public objectives and a series of private objectives. And once someone meets 4 total objectives, some sort of threshold of a combination of those objectives, then they're the winner.
I asked them if they could give some examples, and they said, sure, stuff like Mansions of Madness, Gloomhaven, Arkham Horror, Horrified. So these are like very thematic games where the goal is just to either win or lose, on the game. So interesting, since I'm more of a kind of a Euro style player, I tend to go for games where, the objectives are scored in victory points. I like the concept of a Euro that you can win or lose based on an objective, but I can't picture one that does that. I think it'd be pretty fascinating to find something where everybody has different objectives, but you're playing the same type of game, but the objectives maybe are different. That could be kind of fun.
There's got to be some out there, right? That's be nice to hear some examples if anybody has any.
Yeah, right on. Let's jump into a description of El Grande.
In El Grande, 2 to 5 players are powerful lords seeking to control territory and gain influence in 15th century Spain. In other words, vying to become El Grande. But before getting into the rules, I just want to point out how incredibly simple the rule set is for this game. Now, I don't mean easy or shallow, just simple. In fact, it's so simple, I'm going to give you a pretty comprehensive rules description in less than 3 minutes. And I don't mean a simple summary, I mean enough to get you started on your first game. You don't believe me? Well, here we go. I'm starting the stopwatch now. The game is played on a map of Spain broken down into 9 territories, 10 if you count the imposing dice tower-looking 3-dimensional Castillo. Each of these territories has ascending point values for the players with the first, second, and third most caballeros in each territory. There's also a king token that significantly affects play. Players can only take actions in regions adjacent to the king's region, but they can't take any actions in the king's region itself. And that's the board. Each player has a set of meeples or caballeros that at any given time can be in the player's province or in active supply, at court, or the active supply available for placement on the board, or on the board itself. Each player also has a set of cards with power values ranging from 1 to 13 and also containing a number of caballeros. The power value determines player order, and the caballero count tells you how many meeples that card moves from the player's province to their court. There's also a row of action cards that will be shared among the players. Each action card provides a, you guessed it, action, like scoring a region immediately, moving caballeros around the board, or moving the king to a different territory. Each action card also has a number of caballeros. This time the caballero count indicates how many meeples a player can move from their court to the board itself. Each round, players will play 1 power card and move the indicated number of caballeros from their province to their court. And once all players have played a power card, each player will then choose and execute an action card from the action card row. Player order is dictated by the numbers on the power card a player uses. The higher the number, the earlier in the player order. But normally, also a lower caballero count. Playing an action card includes deploying the indicated number of caballeros to regions on the board and taking any other action indicated on that card. Players also have the option of placing any leftover caballeros in the Castillo, which is scored like a region. The game's played over the course of 9 rounds, and on the 3rd, 6th, and 9th rounds, players will score the regions of the board. After the 9th round, the final tally will take place, and the player with the most points wins. And that's it. Clocked in at exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds. El Grande was designed by Wolfgang Kramer and Richard Ulrich and is published by Hans im Glück Games.
Okay, so welcome back, and we're going to jump into gameplay and mechanisms here. And I would like to hear what you guys think of this. When did this game come out? This game came out like, what, 15 years ago? 20 years ago?
96 maybe?
95, I checked. 1995.
So let's jump into the gameplay and mechanisms of El Grande.
This is an exceptionally svelte, efficient game. And one of the things that I like about it is the action selection mechanism, which we had talked about in a number of different games on a recent episode. And in this case, you are bidding for an action that allows you to put workers, knights, or as Shut Up and Sit Down put it in their instructional video, little sad men, into your court from your province, and then you have your action cards that you get to choose based on your position in the auction, and that allows you to put tokens out on the board, or little sad men out onto the board, and take whatever action it is that's in that card, so you get the opportunity to pick which card looks the most attractive to you. And I think that's really neat. I mean, because there's a lot of interplay there between the number of people you're putting out, the action that you're taking, and it's a really interesting way to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, right? But when you're playing it, it's really easy. You put out a number, the number has some amount of figures on it they're going to put out there, and then the highest number gets to choose the action that they want to do first. And then usually the higher number has the less guys on it. So it's this balance of, ooh, do I want this action first, or do I want to put more guys out first? It's tough to plan against. I think that was my biggest, I don't want to call it a flaw, but something that was tough for me. You really can't plan that much. You can sort of have a feel for what you want to do, but kind of chaotic, I think.
Yeah, it was very chaotic, and I liked it too, right? I like that type of action selection where you're picking from a row of cards, a river of cards, and the actions change every time. Every time they're a little bit different. But you couldn't really plan for what you're going to be able to do the next round. So it was more just, pretty tactical. In fact, this is going to be weird to a lot of people, but to me, the game this reminded me of the most, and it's a game I've been playing a lot lately, is Libertalia, because it feels like every turn, that's all you're doing. You're just making this tactical choice it's going to benefit you this turn. In Libertalia, yeah, you get a couple extra gold coins if you make the right choice, or you kind of like set yourself up right. In this one, you get a couple extra points, or you get yourself set up for a couple extra points in the scoring phase. And so it felt just really tactical. I kind of jump in, see what looks fun for this round. I heard this game compared recently. Somebody had said like, "Oh, why do you call this an area control game? This is a Euro. This is a classic Euro game." This game is just a silly, light, fun game. Like, there didn't feel anything like heavy planning. This is not a Euro in any way. It didn't feel thematic. I wouldn't call it like an Ameritrash in any way. It's not, like, it is area control obviously, but it just felt like a fun, light romp. It's just like a fun little romp. And from a mechanism perspective, that's the most interesting thing going on, but it definitely made it so that you couldn't really plan for what was going to go later. Now, one other mechanism I want to talk about is the Castillo, because, you've got these areas that you're putting out workers on the board when you're placing your things, and those are going to have the most immediate impact, and they're going to set you up for some of those immediate scoring cards and obviously the scoring rounds. But one other place that I neglected most of this game was this Castillo, where you can just dump guys in there. And you don't know how many are in there, right? People have to call it out when they put them in there, but I wasn't keeping track. I had no idea how many people had in there. So usually it was like, well, I don't see where it's going to be beneficial for me to put guys. So I'm going to dump some guys in that Castillo. But then at each of the scoring phases, you would get to score the Castillo, which was, kind of like a region on its own. But then you got to basically make the first choice of, whoever had the most in there got to make the most impactful choice right before scoring happened of which realm they could put them into. That was really fun to kind of develop an understanding of over the course of the game, where at first I thought, that's a stupid mechanism. Why do I care about that? And by the end I was like, that's pretty cool. I kind of dig what's going on there.
By which I think Tim means he dropped a bomb on me in the last round by dropping his guys from the Castillo into a spot that I had made a big scoring spot through my last move. So nicely done, Tim.
Yeah, and to further that, that's also where I put my guys from my Castillo. So there's a secret wheel where you decide where you want to put the guys from your Castillo. You decide right before you put them out there. So Tim and I both picked the same spot. We both had the same amount of guys in the Castillo. So I thought I was going to get the 7 points. Nope. Tim got the 7 points. Ended up winning the game by 6 points. I think 124, 118, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was an exciting moment, and that Castillo reveal at the end of every scoring phase was pretty fun, and that was a neat mechanic. So along with that, I mentioned the scoring phases. There's 3 scoring phases in this game. And so it's after the 3rd round, after the 6th round, and after the 9th round, the last round of the game. What'd you guys think about that way you kind of tallying up the points and how that it kind of has a nice rhythm to it, I think, the way you do the scoring every 3 rounds.
Yeah, just smooth, clean, easy to track. It was interesting that they kind of had a little space out on the board, a tracker to kind of go through each of the regions. Totally unnecessary. You probably could have just gone left to right, top to bottom, kind of traditional. But it was kind of a nice little mechanism that they had in there. Thought it was fun. You kind of had 3 rounds to jockey for position and set yourself up. But until that 3rd round in each era, nothing really mattered that much. Someone else could take it over. So it gave you a little time to plan and work towards something. But of course, everything could be switched around in the final round before the scoring. It was interesting. It's pretty clean and straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. I liked it because it gave you something to work toward, and that gave you something that you could actually do a little bit of planning for. I did like the fact that it had that scoring track on the side of the board, and it reminded me a little bit of Robotech Reconstruction, where it had this track that seemed, at the time, almost, why you're taking up so much board space with this scoring track. But it really does, it helps you follow what all is going to be happening and in what order, so that you don't forget, like, for example, pick something on your wheel. Don't forget to do that. The Castillo, don't forget to do that. That each of these different regions is going to be scored. Don't forget to do that. So these things all end up making a huge difference in the end. And so having something in there as a reminder, I thought was kind of nice.
So we talked about the scoring. We talked about you have the numbers 1 through 13 in your hand. Those are your power cards, is what the game calls them. And you use those for the action selection to put your guys out and the area control. Is that it? Are there any other mechanisms? That's
it. Yeah.
The only mechanisms game. And then the way that these all tie together is kind of where the magic happens. So I think how this all blends and how the game unifies these is pretty amazing. The amount of decisions that explode out of this seemingly very simple rule set.
Let me go back to something we talked about for a moment earlier, but I want to kind of expound on it a little bit. There was the numbered cards, the power cards, which it was a pretty obvious correlation. The higher the number of a power card that you had, the fewer knights that you got, or caballeros that you got to put out. So if you were going to go earlier in the turn order, you got to put out fewer caballeros, and then the more caballeros you put out, the later you were going to go in the turn order. With the action cards, there was a similar kind of dynamic. There were various numbers of caballeros that you could put out into the various regions on the board based on the action. And I'm curious if you guys felt like there was a clear power differential there. Like the same way that there was, if you're putting out a 12 or a 13 card, you're not going to get to put out any or maybe one caballero into your court. But did you think there was a similar kind of thing going on with the action cards?
So, Chris, just to give some more context with that there's this mechanism where the power cards allow you to bring caballeros from your province to your court. And that's kind of a holding area for these guys where that can carry over from round to round to round. The action card that you pick lets you bring caballeros from your court to the actual map. So that whole mechanic there is what you're touching on, and the power of those cards from the lowest to the highest that let you place more caballeros out there on the map. What was your question, Chris? Now I'm just starting to wrap my head all around this stuff, and it's crazy. Like all the stuff, all the dynamics that are going in from these simple mechanics.
With the power cards, it was very obvious. The higher the number of power card, the earlier you go in the turn, the fewer caballeros that you get to put into your court. That made perfect sense because basically you were sacrificing the ability to put caballeros into your court by getting an earlier turn to pick an action card. But then the action cards, it seemed less obvious to me. Like which action card made the most sense to you depended on your strategy and what you were trying to accomplish. Yet they also came with a different number of opportunities to put caballeros out into the provinces. I'm not entirely sure if it matched or made sense the same way that it did with the power cards.
I totally agree. So you refocused me. I talked about this whole province court to map thing because depending on where you were with your caballeros in the different spots, like say you had plenty in your court, so you had 6 caballeros in your court and they're ready to go to the map, you could pick this move the king one that would allow you to put 5 caballeros out there, as opposed to the intrigue. Was that the lowest one typically? That had the weird, funny-looking dude on it and only let you put one guy from your court. So the action on the intrigue card might be to move 5 or 6 caballeros around, but only let you put one caballero from your court out on the map. A lot of it had to do with how you had previously positioned yourself and your caballeros and what location they were in. So there's some nuance here that I think that I'm starting to realize as we're talking about it, that whole province to court to caballero corresponding with which action you want to take. And I think that was amazing, the way that interplay there was pretty neat.
Yeah, I think what you're asking about, Chris, is the balance. Like if you're only going to get to put one character out, one caballero out from your court out to the board, is that, do you get less of a benefit from a greater benefit from the action card? And yes, I think you do. When you set it up, you have the 1 through 5 action cards, and they're different stacks. And I think they're, in most cases, going to be less powerful the more caballeros you get to put out. So, yeah, I think it's balanced just like the choice of the power cards. But it can really depend on your strategy. Like the last round of the game, it was hugely impactful for me to be able to move the king. So because I got to go first, I bid my 13, which I still had left in my hand, and I got to go first, and I took the move the king action. Most rounds of the game, the move the king action does almost nothing for you, but it does let you put 5 caballeros out on the board. So in that case, though, it was hugely impactful because it really limited where you guys could put your caballeros. I moved it to a region I didn't care about, so you guys could mess around up there, but I could take control of the regions that I wanted to put them in, and I could place them first. So that was a really powerful action in the very last round of the game, but it was a pretty weak action most other rounds of the game. What I was getting the sense of, I was equating this to underwater cities throughout the game, because in underwater cities, there are 3 colors of actions you can take around the board, and there's the green, the red, and the orange. The orange actions, I think I've got those colors right, are the most powerful by far, but when you play a card that matches with it, they're the weakest cards. And this was pretty similar to me. It's like, you're giving up something if you're taking this other action. But in some rounds, it just didn't matter that much. And so it was totally fine to do that. I think they did an amazing job of creating balance in a game full of random card selections. And, everything about it was balance. It was like, do I play a higher number to go first? Well, I'm going to get less guys into my court. Do I, pick a stronger action? well, I'm going to get to place less guys out on the board. So felt really, really balanced. Every decision, there was no obvious answer anytime. There was always a tough choice between the number of caballeros you get to play around with and the power of the action, or how quickly you got to take it.
You said that move the king card doesn't do much for you. I disagree. I think that moving the king card was one of the most interesting cards in the game. If you have it right before one of the scoring rounds, especially, you can lock up essentially one of the regions where you have majority. You give yourself, the 7 point region right there. Or you can shove them away in the corner. You can, eliminate somebody else's abilities to add characters on the map in certain places. I thought that move the king card was really neat and an interesting take. Again, the more I'm thinking about it, there's probably a lot more I could have done with it, a lot more nuance that I'm not seeing. So I thought that was really cool, the way that move the king card worked.
Well, and I agree. That hidden nuance was, a huge thing in this game. It really was. And I played this game, and you guys probably did as well, very much by feel, like not really understanding fully the strategy of the game. It's our first play, I think, for all of us. And just kind of started clicking things and seeing what happened when I did various things, and seeing how it worked out, and then seeing how the game progressed over the course of the rounds. I would love to play this game again and see how it feels on a second play with some understanding of the strategy, because I feel like there's this sheen of very basic actions on the surface, but that as soon as you dip below that, there's this tremendous amount of strategy that you can apply to it that I wasn't capable of applying at this point, but I think you could.
Yeah, Chris, your score showed that you did not have a good grasp on the strategy in this first game.
Ouch.
Well, that was luck. That was the luck, Tim.
So
I want to counter something else you said, Tim. Since you're saying ridiculous things, there was another thing you said ridiculous earlier, was comparing this game with Libertalia, and I mentioned it too. And the more I think about it, I think this game is nowhere near as chaotic as Libertalia. Especially if you get 4 players in Libertalia, there's just no way you're gonna know what the heck's gonna happen. But I feel like I did have a little bit of, well, you saw from round 1, I was in last place by far. And at the end of the game, I was near the lead. I had a chance to win it at the very end. I was very meticulously thinking about what I was going to do and where I wanted to put my guys and how this might work out and what I could control when it was my turn. So I feel like that's a huge difference. I don't know. I think just the level of, don't shake your head at me, Tim. The level of chaoticness from Libertalia to this game is drastic, I think. I want to recant my earlier statement.
Adam, you had a significant lead on me going into the last round, but I won by a significant lead. Why? Because of the random number of characters I threw in the Castillo, and that we both pulled them out, and we both randomly put them on the same spot, and I won. And it was a Libertalia game, right? It was like, well, this is a good spot for me, but if Tim thinks to put there, then it's going to be bad for me, but I think he's going to put somewhere else. It was just a Libertalia luck game. If I had placed it somewhere else, you would have won. And if you had thought I was going to place it, you wouldn't have placed it there. You probably could have taken another 5 points and won the game. It's a totally Libertalia game.
Don't try to go Vicini. Don't try to go Princess Bride, Iocane Powder on me. Like,
that's all it was, dude. It was a Princess Bride game. That's all it was in that last round. And that's what Libertalia is. And they both created fun moments.
I give Tim credit for acknowledging that his win was purely luck. That shows character, Tim.
Tim is absolutely correct that his win was. That's totally correct. So yes, there is that Iocane Powder moment of this game when you're deciding on your little wheel where you want to put your caballeros out. But there are moments of this game, a lot of moments of this game that aren't that at all, and it comes down to wits and feeling clever. There was plenty of points in this game where I felt clever. There's clearly some actions you can take and get yourself points right away, and a significant amount of points, and it's not random at all.
Just like Libertalia. Hey, you know what other game this reminded me of actually is Brian Baru, because you kind of have the same segments of like, in this game, right, it wasn't just about the Castillo, but it was also about like, hey, I'm the first person going, so I'm going to pick a card. I don't think that Chris cares about going that quick this turn, so I'm going to play like my 9 and hope that everyone goes below me so I can pick the first card. Or I really care. I think Steve and I want to fight for the same card. So I'm going to play the card that's just higher than where I think he wants to give up people based on what's in his court. That was a lot like Brian Brew to me, where it's like, do I play the high card to get this benefit, or I play the lower card and get this other benefit? Very balanced, very similar, just like Libertalia. It's all about the mind game. They're both the same. That's all I'm saying. This one felt the same as both of them to me. They're very similar. Like Brian Baru, it also had that chaos because, you could play the game and say like, well, I think Adam's going to think I want this region, so I'm going to play this other thing to get this other benefit. It was the same thing, and it's not a bad thing. It's like, this is not a bad comparison. They're fun games. Like, we had a blast. We had a fun time laughing about this game and joking about what happened. And, oh, Steve just took that card. I didn't want him to do that. Or you took that action. You don't need that action. What are you doing with that action? Right? It was just like that fun kind of guessing what other people are going to do and try to outwit them. And that's a fun thing. It's good.
Chris, can you add some common sense to the situation here?
Well, let me try to bridge the gap. Let me try to create peace here. I totally get what you're saying, Tim. That there is a mind game aspect to it. I don't fully understand Libertalia still. There's a bunch of silly little pirates with like weird pictures on them, and I don't think it has anything to do with that. But I definitely see how there's an attempt to anticipate where your opponent wants to go and then counter them. I mean, that's like, board game 101, right?
All right. Well, let's talk about the theme and production of
It's big.
El Grande.
It's Grande.
There is no theme in production here. It's the most pathetic theme in production I've ever seen. And yeah, that's all I have to say about the theme in production.
I can't entirely disagree with that. I mean, it's a bit... This is not an impressive game to look at.
I don't know, you guys. I like Spain. I like the Iberian Peninsula. But what have you got here? You've got some cubes and some little fleur-de-lis and some sepia tone art on the map. They could be a map of anything, but they happen to pick Spain, and they threw in some castles. So it is tough to disagree with.
There's some meeples.
I am trying to find something to argue about, but I can't really do it.
Adam, you don't have to argue just for the sake of arguing. You could just agree with us.
Hey, it was made in 1995. Come on.
Yeah, it looks like it was made in 1995.
All right, so would you request to play this game again?
Without a doubt. I thought this game was really fun. I didn't play it with any kind of understanding of strategy, but unlike some games we played, I could see that in subsequent plays, in a game or two, I could get it, and that is the thing that draws me into a game. When I play it and I say, this engaged me, and I can see how I would start developing strategy. I love the fact that this game moved quickly. It was fast. The turns were simple. Like Sulkin and games like that, there were very simple decisions to make, but they were impactful, and I really enjoyed that. Having said all that, I mean, we talked about the production a second ago. It's not the most exciting. I mean, this could have been anything. Like Adam said, they drew a map of Spain on there, broke it into a bunch of regions, and it's not the most exciting area control theme. I love to have a game that has more theme to it, so I think the mechanisms and the simplicity of it would bring me back, because I think you can jump into it quickly and not have to go to the rulebook a bunch of times. In fact, I don't think we went to the rulebook once tonight. That's the first time that's happened in a long time, and I think that's really nice. But it is offset a little bit by potentially oversimplicity and lack of themes. So I would definitely choose to play this one again. I'd ask to play this one again.
I would also request to play this one again. I had tons of fun playing it. The actions that you're doing, the cards that you're picking, the choices you're making actually matter and make a difference, unlike Libertalia, where you can just pick anything and do whatever and it doesn't matter, and you might end up better off than if you would thought you were making a good choice in Libertalia. So yes, I would totally request to play this one again.
So here's the deal, guys. If I had not played Libertalia a few weeks ago and purchased it and then played it a dozen times since then, I would probably want to pick this game up and add it to my collection. It is a fun, light romp where you can make some decisions that might have an impact, but you never know. You got to just play it with the fact that you might be losing to just the random head game that you're playing with your opponent and the fun of it. It's fun. It's a fun game. It's not super exciting to look at. There's no theme to it. Libertalia is more fun to me, and it feels the same to me. So I probably won't ever request to play El Grande, but if anyone puts this on the table, I'm going to jump right into that. I will remember how to play it because there's like 3 rules in the game, so I'll never have to read the rule book on it. And it was a blast. It was fun decisions. It was exciting moments. It's a cool game. If anyone tells me that this is a Euro game, you're wrong. I just saw this debate on Twitter recently. I think it was no pun included, just said, I can't believe people call this an Ameritrash game. This is clearly a Euro game. The only thing Euro about it is how ugly it is. Other than that, this is not a Euro game at all. This is full of just luck, wits, raucous, fun moments. There's no Euro in this game. it was a good time. I probably wouldn't pick it. It's outdated. There's plenty of other games. I'd rather Blood Rage feels very similar to me. Like Blood Rage is an area control game. It's got more theme. It's pretty random. You go into a combat, you don't know whether you're going to win because you're playing that head game with your opponents. That's a more fun head game to me. But I really enjoyed the game. Be happy to play it anytime.
Man, wait, I gotta push back on this Blood Rage thing, because Blood Rage is clearly a superior game here.
Well, yes, absolutely it is. That's what I just said. That's what I just said. I just said I'd rather play Blood Rage than this.
Yeah, but I mean, not even like, but it's not even comparison.
Yeah, it's a huge evolution, right?
Yeah, it's a huge evolution. I mean, it's so much that I wouldn't even compare the two. I mean, and I'm not even talking about theme and all of that, because just in the weight of the minis of this one, I mean, that right there is it's a whole different world. The head game here, to me, is interesting, but it's so less interesting than the head game in Blood Rage. Because in Blood Rage, it is very head-to-head. I mean, you're going at each other, and I'm trying to think, what card are you going to throw down? I mean, this one, in El Grande, you're sort of doing that at a broader level, like where people are going to put pieces out on the map, and that's interesting, but it's not nearly as interesting as the head-to-head ability to, say, negate somebody else's card or something like that, which is really where I think this, as an area control game, you can see how much it's evolved since 1995 when this game came out, worlds apart from the games that we're playing now.
Well, I already regret bringing Blood Rage into the conversation, but since I did, Adam, you have to fire one from the existence on the planet. Is it Blood Rage or El Grande? Which one do you choose? Which is the game that sticks around?
I'm starting to feel like Blood Rage after the first round, it's kind of over. Like
that's not true.
No, I feel like that's how it is. Like, oh, like the game we're in right now, Chris, tell me Chris isn't gonna win.
That's 100% not true.
No, Chris isn't gonna win. I'm gonna win this one, and the only reason that you think Chris is gonna win is because he won Yggdrasil, and that's your only goal in the game. That's not the only way to win the game. That's crazy.
If I have to fire one, I don't know. I've played Blood Rage enough times now that I'm ready for something different. So if I played El Grande 20 times and Blood Rage 20 times, I don't know. I'll let you know when I get there, Tim. I don't have to answer your questions.
Okay. Oh man, no hot takes out of Adam today.
Yeah, give me the 3-inch mini of a sad little caballero, and maybe I'd see this all differently.
Chris, you keep making it so hard to agree with you. Like,
dude, I don't want people to agree with me. I want to be right.
Who cares about the minis? That has nothing to do with the good game. Well, I'm pretty sure nobody listening to this got any value out of the conversation about El Grande, but we did have a fun time playing it, and I'm glad we all got a chance to experience. It's a game that's been on my wanna playlist for a little while, so it was fun to dig into it tonight. Well, we're gonna jump into a El Grande themed cocktail and some games that have been on our table right after this. All right, welcome back. Chris, what do you have for us? What's our cocktail of the week?
All right, well, tonight's drink is a mixture of the old and the new. It also draws off some similar DNA from some of the drinks that we've tried in the past in this show. So first, the old. I mentioned on a few of my previous segments how cocktails really weren't even a thing back in the old days, and in this case, the old days is 15th century Spain when El Grande takes place. If folks were drinking alcohol back then, it really was more likely to be wine or beer. And one wine variation that they would have had back then was the Spanish fortified wine sherry. We experimented with sherry a little bit last summer when we sampled the sherry cobbler for our review of Obsession. This time we're taking that venerable old Spanish tradition of sherry and putting it to use in a new variation of the pomada, which we drank back in January for La Granja, so lots of Spanish drinks recently. So the pomada created a refreshing treat by mixing lemon lime soda and gin, or a special gin variant found in Majorca. But the Rebujito cocktail, which we based this week's cocktail off of, is a popular Spanish drink that replaces the gin from the pomada with sherry for an even lighter session drink that'll keep you sharp through a whole gaming session of El Grande, except that I had a couple of them, and by the end of it, I was actually playing worse than I was at the beginning, probably due primarily to the alcohol. But less likely to happen with gin, right? So now for the new. The twist I'm adding here to the traditional Rebujito is Ancho Reyes chili liqueur, which is absolutely amazing. If you haven't tried it before, it's become one of my go-tos when making anything with tequila or mezcal, such as a margarita or other similar drinks like that. It adds just enough pepper taste, a unique and interesting flavor in a lot of drinks. And it works perfectly in our Rebujito for a variant that I'm calling the El Grande in honor of our game tonight. And it works thematically too, because chili peppers are endemic to the Americas, so not likely to have been found by our 15th century Spaniards, but the 15th century was also the era of colonization, and Spanish explorers certainly would have encountered chilies in their travels to Mexico and beyond. So here's what you're going to need. 4 ounces of lemon lime soda. Now, there's nothing wrong with going easy here and using Sprite or 7-Up or whatever, and that's what I found on most of the recipes online. But personally, I like the homemade version for my drink. I made my soda out of 2 ounces of soda water, 1 ounce of simple syrup, and a ½ ounce each of lemon juice and lime juice. You'll also need 2½ ounces of sherry. Now, the recipe I used calls for Fino sherry, but I suspect that most varieties would do just fine here. Finally, if you want to upgrade your Rebujito to an El Grande, you're going to want to add in 1/2 to 1 ounce of Ancho Reyes, depending on your taste. I say go big or go home, but that really is a personal preference. You're going to mix these ingredients in a tall glass with ice, and that's it. You're done. It's as simple to figure out as how to play a game of El Grande, and it's just as fun. Salud!
Chris, this cocktail was all right. I'm not a big fan of sherry, so I didn't love it. I did not try your pepper flavoring just to stand in solidarity against colonization. The drink as itself, I could skip in the future. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Not my favorite.
Chris, the pepper liqueur, is that actually, it has like a kick, a spicy kick to it?
It does have a little spicy kick to it. And honestly, Tim, I think if you tried it with the Ancho Reyes, I think you would have had a very different experience. It gives you more of the pepper and less of the sherry. Highly recommend that if you ever decide to try this one again. Or basically put Ancho Reyes in almost anything. Put it in your morning cereal. You'll love it.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. I'm definitely going to be picking some up for some future cocktails. Thanks, Chris. Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to talk about a game that I had on my table this week, Magic Maze. This is a game that came out in, I think, 2016, won the Spiel des Jahres in 2017. This is a cooperative game, but the great thing about Magic Maze, you can't quarterback in this game because you can't talk. You can't say anything to the people around you. Now, this is a silly, light, fun game, but I gotta tell you, had a blast playing it, and I would be happy to jump in and play this again anytime. The concept of this is that you are adventurers, traditional high fantasy D&D adventurers, but you're in a mall looking for your gear, and then you gotta get out of the mall. And you got a limited amount of time to do this. So you basically have 4 different colored pawns that represent your thief, your warrior, your cleric, etc. And they all have a symbol for a weapon on them that they're trying to find. You start with just 1 card in the middle of the mall. Think, Betrayal at House on the Hill style. And there's going to be an opportunity to explore and flip over new cards that represent other areas of the mall. And basically what you're going to do in the base game here, and apparently there's a whole bunch of modules you can add in, but you're going to be trying to move through the mall, turn over cards that eventually will reveal the specific weaponry that your characters, your pawns, are trying to find, get those pawns to that weaponry, and then get them out of the mall. But here's the big kick. Each character, or each player in the game, only has 1 card that represents the type of action that all the characters can take. So, for example, you're in a mall, you can move north, south, east, west, right? But one of the players only can move characters north. And so the one player has to move all 4 characters whenever they need to move north. So you're trying to move around this maze with all kinds of walls and everything like that. And what might happen in the first turn of the game, for example, is you've got all 4 characters at different ends of this little card. Aside from being able to move direction, one of the players can also move them up or down escalators. One of the characters can actually reveal another card when they're at a doorway that matches their color. And then another character can actually use these portals that will allow them to bounce back and forth between the different rooms in the building. So, first round of the game, Samantha puts down her move left card. Basically, that's what she's got in front of her. So she moves 2 of the characters to the left. Now, one of them needs to move north. One of them needs to move south. So Tim then gets to move one of the characters north because he's got the north-facing card. And he also has the card that says when a character gets to a doorway, he gets to flip over another card. So he flips over that card, continues moving the character north because he can go there, but then it hits a wall and it has to move to the right. Well, Danielle didn't notice that that character is waiting to move right. So she's just sitting there watching for some other character to do something. And in the meantime, that pawn's not doing anything at all. By the way, there's a timer. There's a 2-minute timer here. And there's a few spots around these tiles that will come up that will have a little timer icon on it. And if you can move a character on one of those timer icons, you get to flip the timer over. Then that timer gets blocked out. You can never use it again. So it's this frantic race to try to move all of these 4 different pawns, different directions around the mall, get them to explore different areas, but only some people can do things. So I might be the person that only has the move north and teleport card, but I see that somebody needs to move up an escalator so that they can get to a level where their weapon is. I can't say anything to my my cooperative gaming buddies, and I can't move it myself. The only thing I can do is that there's this red pawn that you can put in front of somebody, basically to just tell them there's something you should be doing. You can't give them any idea what that is, but you want them to be doing something. So Danielle's sitting there, and I'm waiting for her to move this pawn up this escalator, but she's not moving it. She doesn't seem to have any idea that it needs to move up the escalator, so I put the pawn in front of her, and she says, oh, I was supposed to move a character to the left. Except that's not what I want her to do. I want her to move up an escalator, but instead she moves a different pawn to the left when actually we needed it to go north. So she just took it away from the route that we wanted to do because she thought that's what we were trying to tell her to do. That's what this game is. It's this frantic mess of not being able to communicate, moving these things around, working together. I had a blast with it. We all had a blast with this. We can't talk. Nobody's saying anything. At some point, somebody picks up the red pawn and is just slamming it down in front of the other character because they're other player because they're just not getting what you want them to do. It was a lot of fun. It's a very family weight game, very approachable, but we had a good time playing it. I would be happy to go back to it anytime.
How old was the youngest participant in this one?
Oh, everybody was adults here. I think the youngest person was 45 in the room, so it was all there was no kids in this game that we were playing.
Would it work with a 10-year-old?
I think it would, yeah. Now the base game, like the person who brought it over for game night, he said, listen, the first time you get into it, it's going to be crazy. You always forget what your card does and all this stuff. So we're just going to play the very basic, simple version. And we beat it the first time through, but barely. We had a couple close scrapes where we almost didn't make it out. So we just went ahead and we had time to reset it up and play one more time. And we're like, we don't want to learn new rules and new modules, so let's just play the base game again. And the second time we played it, we beat it pretty handily. So if you were just playing that base mode, it'd be pretty straightforward, and I think you could play it with anybody. Apparently, though, then you can start to add a whole bunch more different actions that your cards can do and different types of rooms and different obstacles to make it more complicated for gamers or people that were kind of a little bit more experienced with it. But the basic mode, I could play with my 10-year-old daughter. I think she would get in. We'd probably have a little tougher time of it if you played with some kids, but I think you could do it.
That was going to be my question, was whether you played it with your daughter or not, which obviously you didn't. The other thing was, as you were talking through this, I was looking at the page on BGG and confirmed that you weren't actually crazy, that this is actually traditional explorers, dwarves, fighters, etc. in a mall.
Yeah, totally.
And you kept saying mall, and I'm like, wait, is he saying them all? But no, it's actually mall.
Yeah, it's a silly family game, but we had fun with it.
Would you play this game with any player count other than 4? Does it work with 2? Does it work with 6?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it's only a 2 to 4 player game, and I don't know how it works with those other player counts because we only played at 4 players, so couldn't tell you. I'd probably try it. Okay.
Nice.
And listen, this isn't a game I'm going to want to go back to all the time, but it was a fun 20-minute, hey, we just finished 2 other games. We're about to wrap up the night. Let's just bust something out fun and silly. And it was a good time. All right, so we also played one other game that night, and that game was called Gizmos. And Gizmos, another family weight game. I like the concept of a light engine builder, something you can play in 30 minutes to kind of feel like you're building up an engine. And this game takes the idea of building up an engine very literally, because basically what you're doing is you're buying little contraptions, and those contraptions basically build your engine. They do different things as you're buying them. Gizmos plays like this. On your turn, you have one of 3 actions to do. You can either file a card, so there's a market of several different cards. This is very much like Splendor. Have you guys ever played Splendor?
I have not.
Neither of you have played Splendor. Okay. But basically there's 3 different rows of cards in a market. There's very expensive ones that maybe cost you 5 resource, 5 energy, mid ones that cost you 2 to 3 energy, and the easiest ones cost you 1 energy. So what you can do is you can either take any one of those cards and file it. That means you basically reserve it. Nobody else can take it. But when you file a card, you can take a random energy token out of this little barrel. Or you can take the grab on an energy action. And when you do that, you get to pick which color energy you want. What these energy are, they're represented by marbles. So there's this little barrel with kind of a spout coming out of it. And there's always 5 energy that have randomly come out of here. There's like, I think 4 different color energy. So you might have like 2 blacks, a yellow, and 2 reds showing there. But if you really wanted a green energy, none are showing this time. So you don't get one of those. If you're going to pick one, you just pick one of the ones out of that section, but you get to make a choice of it. And then the third action you can take is to actually build one of these gizmos. So essentially you would spend a matching color energy for the cost of the gizmo, and the lowest ones are just 1 energy. So if you just needed 1 red energy, you just spend one of those red. If it needed 5 energy, it would be 5 red typically. It'd be 5 of one color. So you spend the energy you need to, and then you build it. And what that does is it makes one of the actions you're doing stronger. So for example, the next time that you need to pull a marble off the spout, it might say, whenever you pull a red marble, then you get a free random marble picked out of the top. So it makes the pulling a red marble off a little bit stronger. Or you might build one that says every time you build a black building, then you also get to take a red marble off the thing. And so what's going to happen is you're going to start to build these things up so that you get to a point where you're like, okay, if I pull a red marble, I get to build a black building. Whenever I build a black building, I get to pull a blue marble. Whenever I pull a blue marble, I get to pull a random marble out of the top. So your turns will start to chain up and you get all these things going on. The game plays until you have 16 contraptions built in your little tableau, and then you score them up, and they all have different points on them. But there is also some other ways to collect points. Some of the engines will give you points when you do certain things during the game. It's a light engine builder. It's like a step up from Splendor. To me, a little bit more interesting than Splendor. It does give you a little bit of an engine building feel, but not quite enough variety in what the cards can do to be that interesting. It's a tight little game. Let's say that it's an upgrade from Splendor, but a downgrade from Wingspan just slightly, and that you're kind of triggering certain actions. They do other things, but the variety in the cards is, maybe there's 4 or 5 different types of cards you can build in the game. So the fun part is kind of putting them together, and it plays in like 20 minutes too. So it's okay, but just still a little too simple. Just not enough variety, I think, to get me excited about it.
I remember this game was getting some buzz when it came out, 2018, 2019. Did you play it back then, or was this your first play of Gizmos?
No, this was my first play. We played two games in a row, and again, it worked just fine. It's not something I would ask for again. I don't like Splendor because it's even, too much simpler. This gives just a little bit more interesting decisions, but nothing too exciting. I think the buzz comes from that there's some components here where you've got this like bucket of marbles, and the marbles are these weighty things, and they represent your energy. So it adds this kind of fun tactile experience. Other than that, it's not doing anything too crazy.
Right, it's like a potion explosion situation, which it's another game I've never played. But yeah, all those references you've ever made to Splendor, I'm always like, I don't know what he's talking about. I should have probably brought that up one of these times, but I never did.
Honestly, Tim's comments about Splendor have basically made me decide that I don't need to play it.
Yeah, you don't. Also, I played Potion Explosion recently for the first time, and that is also a similar marble tactile experience. This is more interesting than Potion Explosion. Potion Explosion is not very interesting at all. So,
did you say marble techno experience?
No, it's another tactile experience, I think.
Oh, marble tactile. Okay, yeah. I was like marble techno. I was like, that sounds like a crazy genre.
Yeah, marble. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I guess what I'm learning is that I like the concept of a light engine builder game, but they never pay off for me. They're too light. So maybe these are not for me. I keep trying them, but I'm just not finding satisfaction out of these little light, pretty luck based.
What about Furnace? Is that a light engine builder for you?
Furnace is a heavier engine builder, and I also didn't get a lot of great experience out of that as well. So that one is probably more interesting than any of the ones I've talked about, and a little bit heavier, but still not that amazing. I think the game that's hit the most for me that kind of falls in this category is probably Space Base. That's one that I am happy to go back to and have a lot of fun with all the time. Kind of a similar experience.
I want to go back and try Furnace, where you can't change the order of your cards. I think that would cut down on everybody's going in and try to rearrange the order of their little machines and the order that the stuff goes through. And I think that it sounds more fun to me if you can't rearrange. You can slot one in beginning end or middle, but you can't rearrange the whole apparatus. It works like a factory line where you can slot them in, but you can't change the order.
I agree. That's probably a better game. Although also could be pretty punishing if somebody just got a couple machines out of order at the beginning. They could be out of the game. But it's such a short game. Who cares?
So my future take today is a game that is forthcoming. It is a crowd-funded game. It's not on Kickstarter. It's on GameFound. And I'm not even sure how I saw it, but it's called Nightmare Cathedral. And I know absolutely nothing about the gameplay, but I saw the art on it, and it engaged me so much that I'm going to look more into it to see what this game is all about. In terms of the gameplay, like I said, I couldn't really tell you anything, but it's this kind of, you build this cathedral in the middle of it looks like it's made of bones or something, in the middle of the board, and then in the second phase, it starts manifesting nightmares that kill you and eat things and various other stuff. I'm not vouching for the game other than to say I saw this and it so captured my imagination because I love crazy art. I love macabre art, which is one of the reasons why to this day, even 2 years or so past its due date, I'm still super excited about getting Dawn of Madness. And this strikes me as a variation on that. I mean, if you're interested in this kind of art, this kind of graphic presentation in a game, check it out. It's interesting. Like I said, maybe I'd look at the gameplay, which I haven't done yet, and say, well, this looks silly, but the physical presentation of it just looks otherworldly. That's all I can say about that. It's all the things in a presentation that make me just want to, I don't know, they get me going.
Do you see yourself going in and actually digging through playthroughs and seeing if it spikes your interest more, Chris?
It's interesting looking enough that I will probably do that. I just saw this earlier today, and so I'm really doing it kind of blind. And so I probably will look into this game a little bit more. But, for all I know, this could be all appearance and no substance. I don't know anything about the developer. I don't know anything about the company that's putting this game out. So if macabre gaming is something that is of interest to you, take a look at it and see, and give me some feedback. I'd be curious to know what other folks think of this game.
Yeah, the rough part is that, Chris, nobody who's actually played this game will give you their input because everybody who's looked at this game or played it are all paid reviewers. That's unfortunate. Why do you think games like this, these Kickstarter games, don't actually give them to actual reviewers? Is it because they don't have any confidence in their game?
If only there was a group of people that would go play these games and then give honest reviews about them. That'd be fantastic.
I can't imagine.
But I will say David Turksey's involved with the Automa, the solo mode. So he's reputable, at least. And Chris, the art does have me intrigued. It looks so creepy, and the details on all the components just have that unique artwork that's just kind of gruesome. And it is otherworldly, but it's building a world in this otherworldly world that I want to play around in. So at least I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah, I want to look at this game. Even if I tried it and I don't want to play it, I want to look at it.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm interested.
Well, then maybe you should back it, Chris. Well, actually, hold on to that because maybe you won't actually ever get it. So,
well, Tim, I mean, I know that you're a huge proponent of these crowd-funded games, but honestly, you're not going to push that off on me. I'm a skeptic.
All right, fair enough. All right, well, I think that'll wrap up this episode of Board Game Hot Takes. A bit of silly fun tonight. We'll be back next week with a special episode. So, if you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to interact with us, you can find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.